Welcome to Lancashire Footnotes, Series 2.
Me and Jeannie McIntosh drove in sub-zero temperatures to Caton, a compact, homely loaf of a village somewhere down the Loon Valley, with various modern extensions that have claimed the original name, forcing Caton itself to be rebranded as Brookhouse, apparently. The etymology behind Caton is Norse. It means the town belonging to somebody called Kate. Obvious, really, when you think about it. Before the Norse, it was occupied by the Romans, who presumably couldn't be bothered coming up with a name for the place, as evidenced by the 8-foot millstone bearing the Emperor Hadrian's moniker. That must have been one hell of a quern. Discovered at Artelbeck in 1803. There was a Roman milestone found at Artelbeck too, although not by us, not that freezing afternoon. It's just dawned on me that the millstone might actually have been a misprint. Whatever the case, we've no idea what happened to either artefact. We did find Caton's plaguestone, however, on the corner by the Black Bull at Bull Beck, where, during the medieval period, where the plague and buboes and other infectious disfiguring diseases were commonplace, food and money and gander and stuff were left in the hollow for local lepers and plague victims. Or something. It involved vinegar at any rate. Given the current circumstances, I'm surprised plaguestones haven't been reintroduced. Caton's plaguestone, before it became part of the wall erected centuries ago to prevent drunks from falling in the brook, and afterwards the local meeting point for contaminated villagers, was a Norse crossbase probably. Where the shaft is nowadays is anybody's guess. We had a wander up the hill, where we met an amiable gentleman in the front garden of his 17th century cottage. We forgot to ask his name, which was a shame really, because he had an in-depth knowledge of the local history that he was willing to share. He showed us the church, St. Paul's if you're wondering, which dates from 1245 but was virtually rebuilt in the 1500s. And then again, with the exception of the tower, in 1865. According to the Victoria County history, one door leading into the vestry survived from the 12th century. Miraculous really, considering that the church wasn't built until the 13th. However, we're quoting historical sources here, so don't blame us. It must have been a bit of a claustrophobic squeeze back in the day, being it only 3 foot 7 inches wide. Obviously, people were a lot smaller back then. There's carvings on the jamb depicting Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, allegedly. If you squint and use your imagination, you should be able to depict the canopy of the Tree of Knowledge. The heads of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, who by right shouldn't have been there at all, the serpent and some sort of animal. The doorway itself was filled in during the Victorian period, using rubble and gravestones recycled from the original ruins. During medieval times, most people were illiterate, so they employed the use of drawings instead of written inscriptions, generally denoting their professions such as sheep shearer or crusader or Knight of the Round Table or something. Until relatively recent times, an ancient oak tree stood in Caton, on the steps known locally as the Fish Stones. The tree was reckoned to date from Druidic times, way back in the mists of pagan prehistory. Its branches were employed during the medieval period by entrepreneurial monks to hang their salmon from. Later still, in the 1940s, it was also the site of a portable blacksmith's forge. True to form, however, the tree was dead when we arrived. It kicked the bucket some years ago, after being supported by a specially designed Zimmer frame for a number of years. Just as according to the Lion King's Great Cycle of Life, however, an acorn from said tree is now well on its way to taking up its mantle. Bored with Caton now, and frozen solid, me and Jeannie McIntosh headed off towards Quernmore. For what it was worth, there's not a lot there. but it seemed like a good idea at the time. There was a pub in Quernmore once which would have come in handy because the Arctic wind was taking its toll on my bladder. There isn't a pub anymore, which was why we couldn't film it. It was called the Dog and Partridge, but was converted to a temperance hotel shortly after the completion of the Quernmore aqueduct, because of the overt celebratory behaviour of the navvies. Those Irish labourers earned their racial stereotypes with gusto. In 1970, a Roman kiln for firing Roman pottery, obviously, was unearthed near the Quaker meeting house, but we couldn't find that either. In fact, all we could find was the Quernmore Parish Council, which looked like a small empty barn. So we buggered off to Jubilee Tower, a modest structure, surrounded that afternoon by visitors wearing the worried expressions of brass monkeys. It was built by the wealthy Liverpudlian shipbuilder James Marshall to celebrate Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. Everybody needs something to do at weekend. Marshall was a patriotic Liverpudlian shipbuilder. On the day of the Jubilee, he made the precarious ascent up Clougher Pike in a pony and trap, before setting fire to a beacon he'd placed on the summit. I'm sure Queen Victoria must have been well chuffed with his heroic adventure, assuming somebody told her about it. Decades later, in the 1970s, a mechanical digger working on the drains next to Jubilee Tower unearthed what was at first thought to be two wooden canoes. As it turned out, they were the top and bottom of an oak coffin. Inside were the remains of a woolen shroud and the last remnants of a disintegrated corpse, which carbon dating placed around 600 AD. What the burial was doing up there in the middle of nowhere, we couldn't honestly say. Enough, our stomachs are rumbling and our brains are frozen shut. We'll do our best to return next week with another episode. In the meantime, we're off for a bacon butty and a brew.